Watch Part 1. This is me continuing my rewrite of Revenge of the Fallen. The humans and Team B are en route to find the Matrix. Everyone's having small talk, and Bumblebee tells Sideswipe to remain on his best behavior. Sideswipe says he's always on his best behavior, that's why everyone calls him the loose cannon. And Sunstreaker says that's not what that means. And Sideswipe's like, yeah it does, because the loosest cannon always has to stay alert, or else it'll blow up. And then the two get into a tussle, and Bumblebee tries to break it up, but he's unable to. Until over a loudspeaker, and Stratosphere says they're around their destination. And Lennox is like, perfect. Unfortunately, the country we're going into doesn't have the best relation with America, and will probably be shot down, so Stratosphere, turn around, go home, and for the rest of us, we're dropping out. And all the humans are freaking out, like, what? Dropping out of the back of a plane? But Epps is like, don't worry, just hop into the big space robot cars, and we'll be fine. The Transformers all do their thing. The humans partner up. And Lancer and Moonracer are motorcycles, so they have to use their hologram drivers. But Moonracer is kind of embarrassed because she never took the time to create one. And Blur is like, oh, come on, it's super easy to make a hologram driver. Come on, look at me. See? Just gotta create a face that looks like your voice. And Moonracer's like, And then she creates one, and it's comically not matching her voice. And Lancer just says to put a helmet on. Then everyone drops out the back of the plane, and they free fall for a minute. Leo's freaking out, and he starts gagging, and RC's like, don't you dare, rolls down the window, and he hurls out of it, but due to the wind, it just blows back into her windshield. And Sideswipe and Sunstreaker are laughing about it until they knock into each other. Then everyone engages their Autobot brand parachutes, and they land in the desert, and they start their journey. Meanwhile, the Decepticons, the construction cons, have been installed with the combiner power cores, and with a very, very expensive shot, they form Devastator. And then the Fallen makes them excavate a new site. Meanwhile, Starscream's talking to another Seeker.
Seems like Tesla's on shaky ground. You don't think Clue's considering demoting him? Nah, me neither. Of course, anything goes when you're at the top. Don't you find politics fascinating?
Nothing you say is fascinating.
You're ambitious, too. Think about how far up the ladder we could climb if we had each other's backs. Can you imagine what you and I could do together?
I can, and it makes me sick.
But then a bunch of human army men approach them and say they're trespassing in Karbistan land, and they must leave the country or by the power invested in them by Supreme President Abdul Fakadi, they have to use force to make them leave. The Fallen sees them, and then just immediately slaughters them all. The only shot they were able to get off was a rocket to Starscream. Jetfire is disgusted at this and says that the Fallen's in the wrong here for making the first strike, because we are trespassing. But the Fallen says he doesn't care about the parasites that inhabit this world. He should never question his authority. And he uses his powers to cause a lot of pain to Jetfire. Megatron doesn't really care about the humans either, but he yells at Fallen to stop, and he shouldn't treat his troops that way. He does, and he says Megatron has become so weak, and he slaps him. Back at base Metroplex, Ratchet's working on the ground bridge, but it keeps failing, and him and Chip have back and forth over scientific stuff, and Ironhide's annoyed at it and says he should have joined B, thinking it'll be way more exciting. And then with B and crew, they're stuck in transit, trying to get into Karbistan, but the Border Patrol are being painfully slow and really weird around the women. Sideswipe jokes, are we there yet? And RC gets annoyed at him. But Blur's like, oh, I love this game. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Meanwhile, with Optimus, he steps through a new portal, and Micronus tells him now he has to face the trial of life, where they review his entire life. Starting way back, he was built as Orion Pax. He became an archivist. And even back then, before the Great War, Optimus knew that the Council of Primes weren't the best. Then a certain revolutionary gladiator named Megatron arose. He spoke out about the Autobot Council and Prime's hedonism and debauchery, and how the Prime has to be of the people, by the people, for the people. His words spoke to many Transformers, and he grew a following known as the Decepticons, adopting the insulting term the Primes called Megatron as their own. And the young Orion Pax even kind of agreed with a lot of Megatron's talking points. But eventually Megatron couldn't handle his oppression any longer, so he rose up starting the Great War to overthrow the Primes. But much like many revolutionaries, they get corrupted and even start forgetting what they started doing all this for, and even going against their own teachings due to stuff like the hardship of war and life and shadowy old gods talking to them. Megatron discovered the Fallen, and the Fallen corrupted Megatron, becoming his puppet, making him more and more cruel, eventually leading to the Iacon massacre, where he massacred the majority of the bots there, including the Prime, Zeta, leading to Sentinel to become the new Prime, which leads to Orion's next big moment in his life. And Optimus sees Sentinel and he gets all emotional and tries reaching out for him, but it phases through the hologram. But with the past selves, Sentinel realized that the war was near its end and the Autobots have lost. He had many Autobots gather on Ark ships and scattered. Sentinel placed Orion in charge of the Autobots remaining on Cybertron to always make sure the Allspark never falls into the hands of Megatron. Sentinel left with a group, but then his Ark ship was shot down. Optimus saw this and he decided to launch the Allspark into deep space to get it out of the hands of Megatron, which was an extremely unpopular decision with most of the Autobots. So Optimus decided to repent for his actions by getting a group and going out into the galaxy to find the Allspark, placing a young soldier in charge known as Magnus. Optimus abandoned Cybertron in his most dire years, shot the Allspark into deep space, and eventually destroyed it, damning their species to extinction. Optimus states that he had to do it. Otherwise, Megatron will have got the Allspark, created an entire army of sentient Decepticons, and destroyed and enslaved the galaxy. He's ashamed that he had to destroy the Allspark to do this, but he doesn't care what the Primes say because he had to do what he had to do. But then Micronus morphs into Sentinel Prime and he asks, "Of what of my opinion?" Meanwhile, eventually Team B discovers the Tomb of the Primes, and it's not a big temple in Jordan. It's kind of like an abandoned temple in the middle of the desert. Everyone's kind of sad that there's nothing here. Sunstreaker is like, "The only thing around here is my skid plate," and Sideswipe's like, "At least that looks better than your face," and then they get into a tussle, and Bumblebee picks them up, knocks their heads together, and tosses them out. But the Ralph housing revealed a secret wall, and they find the Matrix. And conveniently, at the same time, Ratchet repaired the ground bridge. The rest of the Autobots and Ness exit the portal with the body of Optimus. The twins cheer about this. Everything's coming up Team Autobot, and Sideswipe shoots a missile up in the air like a firework, which alerts the Decepticons who are flying by, as it's revealed the thing Devastator was excavating was the Sun Harvester. But before Megatron can question it, Skywarp reports to him the Autobots in here, and the Fallen knows that they have the Matrix, which leads into their surprise attack. During the conflict, they manage to actually take out one of the Wreckers and even Lancer, causing Moonracer to freak out. Blur uses his super speed to try and take out Soundwave, rapidly hitting Soundwave before he can register what's going on, until Soundwave notices a pattern, and he hits him with a sonic blast, knocking him into a building, and then shoots a missile at him. And Devastator approaches, and he uses his big vacuum cleaner thing in his chest, and he sucks up Sunstreaker, crushing him. Sideswipe starts freaking out. Bumblebee starts panicking. He's such a bad leader. A lot of his troops are now dead. He let Prime down, and then he gets jumped by a Seeker. Jetfire sees a lot of destruction going on and the death of a lot of humans, and seeing a lot of them actually care about the dead bodies. Jetfire decides to rip the Decepticon logo off his chest, and he shouts that he quits. He gets approached by Jolt, who overheard it. He tells him that he's been in a very similar situation. He used to be a Decepticon as well, until Megatron proved to be more brutal than he expected, and a lot of his friends were destroyed. He offers him to join the Autobots, which Jetfire at the moment agrees, and he turns his cannons onto some Viacons. Meanwhile, Optimus and Sentinel. Optimus is remorseful about Sentinel's death and says that he should have been the one on the Ark instead of Sentinel. But then Sentinel projects Earth.
So majestic and peaceful, this planet. Unlike the final days of Cybertron.
I've wondered what might have been if you had fought the final battle.
Never mourn the past, young warrior.
Optimus presents his spark and says he should be tossed into the pit for what he did to their race.
I am no longer your teacher, Optimus. Thanks to you, our race survives.
Sentinel then morphs into Jazz. Optimus says that he's sorry for causing his death, but Jazz says he didn't. In fact, Optimus passes his test, because reviewing his life, he did anything and everything to prevent the Fallen from winning. Even if that did mean sacrificing the Allspark, it was a necessary end to prevent evil from triumphing. He discovered a new world that the Transformers can call home. Plus, Bumblebee looks really good with my legs. Then Jazz morphs into a giant cluster of sparks, and a big echoey voice says that he can become one. But then all of a sudden, everything stops, and with the big, echoey, awesome voice of Christopher Lee, he becomes Prima Prime and says that it is not Optimus's time yet. As we see Spike gunning for Optimus's body, but he gets attacked by Ravage, Bumblebee grabs him and rips his tail off, tossing him at the Seeker, blasting both of them. Prima tells Optimus that he is worthy to join one, but he's still needed on Earth. His people need him. Then he morphs into Vector Prime and he tells him one day his destiny is to revive Cybertron. To revive Cybertron, they need to repair the Allspark. To repair the Allspark, they need the Matrix. But currently, you need the Matrix to live, and you need to live in the moment right now, so that one day Cybertron can live again. Optimus is kind of confused by this, but then Spike finally gets to Optimus's body, and he plunges the Matrix in him. Optimus's eyes widen, and he starts to fade away and pull back, and then the 10 primes cycle through each other and says, "Remember, till all are one, till all are one, till all are one." And he wakes up and he says, "Till all are one," and everyone's cheering, "Yay, Optimus is back." But then out of nowhere, the Fallen just leaps onto him and uses his powers to steal the Matrix out of him. Ironhide sideswipe and Bumblebee shoot at him, but then he just uses his powers to knock them away, and he leaps back to the Star Harvester. Optimus's eyes start fading and he starts dying again. Ratchet notices that he needs more power, and Optimus notices Jetfire. He yells at him to come to his side. Optimus puts his hand on his shoulder and says that they have to combine. Jetfire is completely confused at that notion. He tells them that they're reincarnations of primes. They both have power core combiners in them. It's a long story, but they have to do this. And then Optimus activates it, and they start combining in a very over-the-top manner.
Let's roll.
Jetfire is amazed at what's going on and feels incredible until they approach Devastator. But calling back to what Optimus learned earlier in the film, he knows that Combiner's weak point is where they combine at. So flying around Devastator, making pot shots, he notices where all of them combine at, so he makes one tactical strike in the back and they all start falling apart. The Fallen loads the Matrix into the Sun Harvester, but Megatron is very confused at this because he states that the Fallen promised him that he'll have the power of a Prime. The Fallen says he will one day, but Megatron says he's promised this for centuries, and now they have the tool to make him that powerful, he demands to have it. But the Fallen calls him foolish and says that he has no idea what lies below this planet, and it has to be activated right now. We need the sun to destroy this planet. But then Megatron stabs him through the back.
You're so weak. So disappointing. There is no command but mine.
Megatron, after killing the Fallen, kicks his body down the Sun Harvester, and he takes the Matrix. But then Jet Mode Optimus flies up, and he says Megatron has something of his. He blasts the top of the Sun Harvester, which causes a lot of energy backlash, melting many Vehicons and even 2 of the Constructicons. Megatron and Optimus fight, but then Optimus just tosses him through a building. Bumblebee hops on his back and tries to distract him, and he grabs his mace and starts choking Megatron with it. Then Optimus crashes in, and Bumblebee jumps out of the way as he drop kicks Megatron to the ground. He slices off his fusion cannon arm and grabs the Matrix. And all the Autobots and Nest agents surround him.
Not to call you a coward, Master, but sometimes cowards do survive.
Starscream and Soundwave call for a retreat. Then we cut back to the Witwicky house and Spike reunites with his family. He jokingly says the first week of college was brutal. Back at base, Metroplex, Sideswipe, and Moonracer are planting remembrance flowers. Megatron notices it as he gets hauled off and locked up. And then out by a stream, Bumblebee talks with Optimus. Bumblebee says that he gets that Optimus might be upset, given so many were lost during his command. But Optimus says that it's all part of leadership, to realize where you fail and try to improve next time. As well as Bumblebee actually did a pretty decent job, because he was able to take so many different Autobots and actually lead them somewhere without much resistance, which took Optimus a long time to achieve. Then Bumblebee asks Prime, what's it like after? And Optimus says, Jazz says he has nice legs. Meanwhile, in the Nemesis 2, Starscream and Soundwave are debating. Starscream says that he should retake command right away, and Soundwave says he should take command, and their first priority is find the Autobot base and retrieve Megatron. There's some back and forth, and we see the Nemesis flying close to the ocean, and then suddenly a ground bridge opens up. Both are confused, and out walks Shockwave. Both are confused, but Shockwave explains that he's been down there for hundreds of years. He was part of the expedition with Jetfire and Megatron to find the cube, until the Nemesis 1 was shot down, with him inside of it. He tried radioing for help, but then he crashed on top of another thing down there, much, much more important. He spent the last 120-something years repairing it. He found the Fallen's flagship, which Starscream recognizes as the Atlantis. Shockwave notes that most of it is operational. He just needs an extensive amount of power to lift it under all the pressure from the sea. Starscream notes, well, now we have a new goal. He maniacally laughs, and then we see a geovent open up by the Atlantis. And panning all the way up to Spike and Optimus looking over the ocean. Optimus gives a speech about the seeds of the future lie buried in the past, set to New Divide by Linkin Park. And that was my Revenge of the Fallen rewrite. What do you guys think? You liked it? You prefer the original? How would you rewrite it instead? Let me know in the comments below.